And with that, I want to turn it over to Steve Hershner. He is the director of the Cedar Rapids Utilities Department, and he's going to give us an update on the Middle Cedar Partnership Project. And we're also going to hear, as part of this presentation, from Jason Gomes, who is doing some outreach work on that project. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Mary Beth. The first thing you're going to see in my presentation is that we all had different presentations, and so you're going to see some very similar slides as part of mine, and I'm going to go over them pretty quickly. But because we do come to this with a common interest, but maybe different audiences at different times. So a lot of this is going to look familiar, and I'm going to try and focus on probably 5 things in particular. I'll handle 3 of them, and Jason's going to talk about 2 of them. I'm going to try and focus more on the why is Cedar Rapids involved. I'm going to talk about something that goes back to Carl's presentation where he talked about acquiring resources, because that's specifically what our project is really particularly interested in, is finding resources to invest in these practices. And then we're going to talk about the need to develop an outreach component and really work with those producers, landowners, farmers. And then Jason is going to focus on where we stand today in terms of some of the practice installation and adoption as we start to move forward with our project. For those, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I do want to try and provide a little background on the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. It was put into the 2014 Farm Bill. Number one, it kind of redirected some of the funding streams that USDA had, but the primary thing that it did from our perspective is that it allowed cities, as a water utility or as a wastewater utility, to be involved in some of these practices. And so this is really the avenue or vehicle that the City of Cedar Rapids used to become the lead partner for the Middle Cedar Partnership Project, to leverage the existing investment in projects that were done with the Miller Creek project, the Bend Tama Water Quality Initiative. So all of those projects were things that we could use to leverage additional funding from the USDA through this Regional Conservation Partnership. So the state of Iowa, through just those 2 projects with the Bend Tama project, the Miller Creek project, is putting forward about $1 million. And so we were able to leverage additional funds, about $2 million from the USDA on top of that. So USDA offered that money in 3 different pots. They looked at national scale projects, they looked at critical conservation areas, that's what I've outlined on here, and then approximately 25% of the funding was made available to states. As you've heard from other speakers today, Cedar Rapids has particular interest in both the water quality side as well as the water quantity side. Critical conservation area and national scale funding, which was 75% of the pot, did not allow for consideration of that water quantity element, but the state funding did. So that was the funding pot that we pursued for our project. Why collaborate? Why work with our upstream producers? We've certainly had an interest in the Cedar River watershed long before the 2008 flood. We were involved in some efforts that looked at the Cedar River for some different potential TMDL issues, that kind of thing. But clearly after 2008, that highlighted things like that public health and welfare. The business of Cedar Rapids is ag processing, food processing. We're using the products that are the result of those row crops in the upstream watershed. As we highlight later, we use a tremendous amount of grain on a daily basis in Cedar Rapids. So it has everything to do with the industry and economy, but clearly trying to minimize runoff under some difficult conditions certainly has benefits for everything downstream from where those practices are installed. And then clearly we are focused on nitrate issue, as are many communities in the state of Iowa, because that's a fundamental factor that we have to achieve. We want to stay under that 10 milligrams per liter for nitrates. Like I said, you're going to see some similar slides here. I'm going to move through them quickly, but when we look at that public health and welfare, when you have a downtown that looks like that, or what Kara shared, that's certainly a challenge, and we certainly highlight here the number of people directly impacted. From a surface area standpoint, the area that was under the floodwater was about 15% of the surface area of Cedar Rapids, but that means that 85% wasn't. And they wondered why they couldn't have all the water they wanted or why they didn't have wastewater treatment. Well, when the river gets to 31 feet, that challenges you on a lot of different bases. So, but more specifically, we look at some of our industrial partners. This is the PepsiCo Quaker facility. You can see the water here, and I can show you the ingredient, Penford, Cargill, and many others that were dramatically impacted too. If they're impacted, they're not going to be buying that grain. There's not going to be those jobs. There's not going to be that industrial activity and vitality for the Cedar Rapids in the region. So all of those things are important to us. Now, I would point out on this slide, Kara showed you one of our earlier wells. We actually added between 10 to 12 feet on all of those vertical wells. So you can see that whereas before that, that's not the right, sorry. In any case, I'm trying to point at something. But you can see that where the original height of that was probably that second frame, and then we've added that 10 feet on top of it. We have some pretty dramatic pictures of trying to take the motors off the top of those wells to get them back in operation. But the map that Kara showed as well highlights why our alluvial well system is considered by DNR, by EPA, to be a groundwater system that's directly under the influence of surface water for the Cedar River. We have an obligation, and clearly we will provide that to our citizens if we ever get to a situation where our finished water is greater than 10 milligrams per liter. We will be notifying our public, our customers because of that. 10 milligrams per liter, the original consideration was from young infants can confuse nitrate for oxygen. That's why it's called the blue baby syndrome. That's typically in infants under 6 years of age. And some people have problems with immunosuppression, can be challenged by that. But clearly, the bottom line is that it would be preferable for all of us if we did not exceed 10 milligrams per liter. And we do have a water supply that is heavily influenced by what's happening in the Cedar. And I'll share more information about that. We have 45 of these vertical wells, but a majority of the water that we use in Cedar Rapids comes from currently 5, soon to be 6 horizontal collector wells. That has a larger center caisson, maybe 10 to 15 feet in diameter, and at the bottom of that, literally like spokes off a wheel, is where we have lateral wells off that central collector. Those wells can typically produce anywhere from 5 to 15 million gallons a day. A vertical well, a very high producer, might get to 1 million gallon, probably less than that. So that's why we're moving to that horizontal collector wells. On each one of those horizontal collector wells, we have nitrate readings continuously being taken from those collector wells because they're a majority of our water supply. That's one tool that our operators currently utilize. Some wells are more directly or quickly influenced by the river than others. So as we see higher levels of nitrate in the river, we can choose which wells we're pumping from at particular times, and that's the way that we currently meet that. We do not have treatment capability currently online to take out nitrate. We are studying that option, but we currently do not have it online. We are actually considering the use of wetlands ourselves as a way to manage or provide a supply that would have a reduced level. And as you saw from that slide that Carl showed, where there was a natural wetland in place, we had water that might have been flowing into it that was anywhere from 10 to 15 milligrams per liter, and it was flowing out at about 1.5. That would be a path that we're exploring in Cedar Rapids as well for the water supply. This is a slide of monthly maximum nitrate concentrations over since the flood. This would be fairly typical before that time as well. The things I want to point out where you see that high numbers where we approach 16 milligrams per liter was back in May or June of 2013. The numbers that you see that are very low correspond to the period of time later July, August, September of 2012. That's during the drought. What happened during that drought period was the crops literally couldn't utilize the nitrate, ammonia, other nitrogen sources that were supplied. That stayed in the soil. When we received those significant rains in early or May, June of 2013, that really pushed a couple of years of nitrogen through some of those subsurface tile systems. And that's why you see that's why those numbers are kind of the outliers, because of those dramatic meteorological conditions. This is another way of looking at that. We see these are the number of days when we've been above 10 milligrams per liter. One question might be, since we don't have treatment, how are we able to keep a finished water less than 10 milligrams per liter? There are sources, if you look back on that, think of that slide that Kara put up earlier, there are places where groundwater does enter our system. That groundwater is typically much less than the 10 milligrams per liter. There are issues with, as that flows through the soil, those wells are typically 50 or 60 feet below the river. There is attenuation, some biological modifications of that nitrate as it moves through there. So there are things that we can count on that will be there, but if we're in a sustained condition when the water is cold, that tends to be our particular time when we're challenged by it, that would be the period when we'd be most likely to exceed that 10 milligram per liter if we had significant runoff carrying that amount of nitrate downriver. But clearly that's one of the reasons why we have those analyzers at the wellhead. That's where we really have to start making some of those key operational decisions, which wells we're going to draw from. So, why partner? We use a lot of those grains in Cedar Rapids. They're an important benefit to our community, the watershed. We need to be thinking about water, consumer health, and safety. And obviously, we're connected to the upstream watershed. We've been involved in a variety of studies and are invested in trying to partner with everyone we can on providing this economic resource to the region, looking at our source water, and trying to mitigate flood impacts. NRCS is providing a little over $2 million. Most of that, $1.7 million, is for reimbursable practices by producers, by farmers. It's over a period of 5 years. And that is for every practice that we've talked about that Carl showed information on, from cover crops, nutrient management, bioreactors, wetlands development, you name it. We have 16 partners. I think there's been a circular that's gone around that lists all of them. Those partners are contributing about 2.3. So over the 5 years, starting with development approval of the agreement with NRCS back in June. Didn't get a lot done last year, maybe a few hundred acres of cover crops. We're seeing substantial growth this year. Jason's going to talk more about that. Again, this is a list of some of our partners, and we thank all of them for their participation. Some of the things that you've heard here from other folks as well: soil health, water quality, water quantity, expanding on a good thing. That looks pretty familiar, I bet. Some of our key objectives: developing those watershed plans, as Carl has highlighted, looking at some of the other best management practices. More importantly here, let's focus on objective number 3, conducting the outreach. Again, that's something that Jason is going to talk about. Project, is it working? That's been one of the questions today. We're going to look at adoption rates. We're obviously going to continue and support the sampling effort that's going on, but we need to work with all of those folks, downstream water users working with conservation entities and upstream producers to help. You know, we want the benefit of those nitrates, et cetera, to stay in the landscape as much as possible. That's why we're going to try and align and develop watershed plans that implement that practice. Again, some of these look pretty familiar as well. And again, highlighting the fact that we do see numbers across the board at a variety of levels, but in many cases, we do see numbers at over 10, and certainly from a municipal perspective, that's a key element for us, and that's obviously why we want to help find resources for producers and farmers to implement field practices that could help minimize some of that loss. So, what is our interest and investment in this? Improve soil health, adoption of tested practices, water quality improvement, and again, the thing that we are most encouraged by is even before we got involved with this, now we see the HUD project, we see other ones. We see a tremendous opportunity within the Cedar River watershed to invest in these practices, learn, work with our producers and farmers to see what is working as we move out here in over the next 5 years for our project, and maybe longer than that for some of the other ones. So, and obviously, we'd like to see a scale of a future Cedar Rapids nitrate removal as minimal a scale as possible, but it is something that we will continue to study. So I want to turn it over to Jason now, and he can follow up on some more specific project data if you have questions about that, and I will.
So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Gomes. I'm the Middle Cedar Partnership Project Coordinator. I'm working with City of Cedar Rapids and Iowa Soybean Association to provide technical assistance for the most part in the Middle Cedar subwatersheds, the 5 HUC 12 subwatersheds that comprise the Benton-Tama Water Quality Project and then the Miller Creek Project. I am the owner of a company called North Iowa Agronomy Partners. We do a lot of agronomy services, soil testing for farmers. So a big part of our business is working directly with farmers, and then another part of my business is doing technical service work for the NRCS. So anytime farmers have equip contracts or things like that, I will work with them on their nutrient management plans and things like that. So within the project areas, I'm assisting basically the project coordinator. Shane's not here today. Shannon was the former Benton-Tama project coordinator, helping them organize field days, do water quality monitoring, planning activities, and some of the administrative and reporting stuff that the city does. We are currently so anytime, the way I've worked it out with the local NRCS district conservationists is that when they get EQIP applications in the project area, I do the conservation planning, and then they do the contracting. So we assess the conservation opportunities for individual farmers on a field-by-field basis. The EQIP, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, is the primary fiscal assistance tool for this whole watershed project. Once we've done the conservation planning, if the producers want to go forward with the contracting process and do nutrient management, cover crops, and install some of these practices, then we do basically one-on-one work to do nutrient management and cover crops. It's kind of a little bit of hand-holding, but it's bringing people along on an individual level to help them install these practices that will improve water quality. So to summarize, like Steve said, the clock started ticking in June of 2015. So we had modest year one goals of conservation planning on roughly 4,000 acres. We've done about 2,200 so far. Nutrient management, 200 acres. We have close to 1,500 acres that are in the process of contracting. They will be contracted, if not this year, then at least next year. But what we're talking about here are commitments for practices. And then cover crops, our year one goal was 500 acres, and we're hoping to get 1,800 or better. Like Sherm says, this is a process where your initial sign up is pretty low, but it kind of builds exponentially. So our goals in next year would be to double or triple that, and then just keep that ball rolling to where we're meeting those project goals that some of these maps you see are talking about, where you've got a 30,000 acre watershed, and really we need to see half of that with cover crops on it, basically. So it's a monumental task, and it's fundamentally changing how people do row crop agriculture right now. This is the project area, the 5 Huck 12, some of which you've seen already. These top 2 would be Miller Creek and then the Benton Tama project, so 134,000 acres, 135,000 acres total. These would be the acres that we did conservation planning on this year. Basically, a lot of that kind of wrapped up here in the spring, and we'll be starting to, once farmers get done with spraying their corn and side dressing, all this other stuff, you know, June and July are times when we get a little bit of time to rest, and it's a great time to contact people and say, hey, what are we going to do next year? Because the exposure is definitely out there. People are aware of this, they're aware of some of the funding opportunities. And out of that conservation planning, these would be our nutrient management acres. And a lot of these are, you know, pretty intensive nutrient management where they're combining nutrient management and cover crops. So not only are they using a cover crop to absorb some of that excess nitrate from the soil, they're also doing nutrient management so that they're not applying an excessive rate to begin with. These would be our year 1 cover crop acres. And then, so in terms of goals, as I look at some of the things that we need to do, my stepson has this thing they do in school where they think intentionally about their goals for the future, and they say, begin with the end in mind. So what is row crop farming when we think about clean water? What does that row crop farming look like? Certainly, you know, different from what we see now. We have to have more surface residue cover. Our nutrient use has to be efficient. Building water holding capacity upstream, whether that's through wetlands or oxbows, building soil organic matter to hold more water in the soil. Moving beyond a partial fallow system where our soil is essentially bare, you know, at least 4 months, 4 usable months out of the growing season. And then thinking about how we manage soil in terms of, so since the Soil Conservation Service and NRCS was founded, you know, it was founded during a time where we had a catastrophic level of soil loss throughout the upper Midwest, you know, the Dust Bowl era. And so a lot of our programs are predicated on thinking about reducing soil loss, or what's an acceptable amount of soil loss. Well, if we're still losing soil, we can farm here for another couple hundred years maybe, but it's not gonna, you know, be here forever. So when we think about using cover crops and eliminating our partial fallow system, we're really thinking about building soil as opposed to not losing it, which is a different kind of farming, I would say. So in progress activities, we, like Carl was saying, Shannon's just completed basically a whole project area-wide tillage survey. So we're going to map all those tillage practices, and we're going to be able to use that to identify producers who are potential partners to do nutrient management, add more cover crops. We're making a big push this coming year to do stock nitrate testing to correlate excess end of the season nitrate in the soil with what rates of nitrogen people are applying. This is something that we're doing with the Iowa Soybean Association's environmental programs. We're filling out all the forms right now. Those farmers will get aerial imagery, so they'll get to compare what their nitrate levels are with other farmers who are maybe using a rate that's maybe 25 or 50% less. We'll do a few nitrogen strip trials. Another big push is quantifying how some of these best management practices can benefit farmers financially. Like Nick was saying, nutrient management is kind of the low-hanging fruit because you can make money by reducing your inputs in year 1. You know, it's not like with cover crops where you're talking about a sort of a theoretical, well, not that it's theoretical, a benefit sometimes some years off into the future to your soil health. And then we'll continue doing the conservation planning and preparing for the 2016-17 EQIP sign up and hopefully triple our numbers from this year and just kind of keep things rolling. So that's all I had, but does anybody have any questions on some of the outreach activities with farmers?
So is there data on when you go out and do the conservation planning with particular farmers, is there any data to that would indicate how long that conservation plan may be in place. Like once the cost share dollars are gone in this project, can you safely say some or all of these acres would still be in conservation practices, or maybe not?
A lot of, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
I mean, these EQIP contracts are gonna be for 3 years.
3 years, okay.
So we hope that they see a benefit from the nutrient management, and we hope they continue to do the cover crops.
But there's no, like, at this point, there isn't any data to say that
No.
X% does or doesn't?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if people are just chasing the program dollars and say, I'm gonna do this for 3 years because I can realize a marginal profit from that, I mean, that may happen, I don't know. But certainly our goal is to change how we do row crop agriculture in these sub-watersheds, so.
I guess I have a question.
Right,
I know I'm in a couple of these
okay.
projects. Between my sons and I, we have over 4,000 acres of
Sure.
farm ground. No one's ever contacted me. I mean, if this is so important, why aren't they contacting the farmer and testing our water? I mean, am I supposed to get a tube and test water in all these?
I'll
I'm not gonna do
I'll
it.
come test your water this weekend. I promise you that. And I'll get your name and I'll talk to you
If
or your
it's such an
sons.
important project, why aren't they reaching out to the farmer more? I've been to
Well-
a couple meetings.
In all fairness, I mean, it's well publicized, and it got off to a slow start in terms of the outreach and the contracting process, but, you know, Shane and Shannon we've been having field days. I mean, you know, there's literally stuff going on almost every week.
I think where would you see it? Like, where should we be looking to reach someone?
Yeah.
Well, if you know there's
Door
a
to door
creek
stuff.
running through our property, and that creek is of interest to you,
Mhm.
why aren't you calling the farmer and saying, we'd like to test the water and see if we could get you in a practice or something?
I don't know if that's, is door to door the most effective? Like,
It's all of the above, but I'll certainly go door to
So
door.
more or less, it's up
Yeah.
to the farmer to know that he's got a creek running through his property and that he should be testing the water and.
At the end of the day, the onus is on you. You know your farm better than I know your farm. I got 1,800 farmers in each county, and I can't make that kind of contact.
And
You know, that's one reason why we didn't get the agreement signed or settled with USDA here in Iowa until June of last year. That's kind of where we say the clock started. You know, it was kind of hard to go out and communicate about what programs were going to be available until we had that agreement completed. Unfortunately, that meant that last year growing season wasn't really able to act on that much. We had very minimal involvement in cover crops last fall. And even now, we know that plans were being made for last year, last spring. So this is really our first opportunity to get into situations like this where we can hopefully connect with you and other individuals who may not have heard about the benefits or the reimbursement that's available through this program. But it's one reason why, you know, I've been making sure that I find time to drive up here to Grundy Center or Benton or LaPorte City or wherever it is to share the information that we do have these resources. And there are other resources coming online as well. So I appreciate folks like Jason and Mary Beth and everyone to set up these opportunities. Some of the other partners that we have in the room, like the Nature Conservancy and the Iowa Soybean Association. So we're all trying to find ways to connect with you and other producers and
Who
farmers.
does a farmer get in contact with to look into some of this?
Are you familiar with
Contact-
saltwater
yeah,
conservation
right here.
district? There you are. Your commissioners, what county are you in?
Several counties, Grundy, Blackhawk.
Grundy County.
So we'll talk,
There's a man around
yeah,
there.
but I'll talk to you after this, and we will.
Well, I'm not concerned about my Grundy County farm because there's no water going through.
We'll talk about your Blackhawk County farms.
Well, there's one south of, south of, oh, most of
Saltwater conservation district. We have a meeting.
Any more questions?
Robin.
What I'm taking from this woman's question if it's so important that we have this information and are trying to address the issue, then why doesn't she get in the mail a letter and a kit? And the letter says, here is your testing kit. We want your results at the end of every month, or whatever time period is appropriate, but so that every farmer in Iowa is expected to do this, and that we gather the information that way, instead of this willy-nilly stuff of this man having to promise her he's going to come when he's already spread so thin he can scarcely make it from pillar to post.
The thing that I would point out about the Regional Conservation Partnership Program that was particularly appealing to me, and I think a lot of other folks in my shoes, is that it's not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're trying to use existing organizations, existing folks who are invested in part of this job, whether it be a conservation board, a soil water conservation district, the Nature Conservancy, the Sand County Foundation. We didn't have to reinvent the wheel. We were working with people who were already out doing this job. It doesn't necessarily easily accommodate an individual letter or report every month to individuals, but it does give us an ability to connect with people who are interested in making those investments, who are interested in participating and looking at the reimbursable practices that we're able to provide through our Middle Cedar Partnership Project, or potentially as we look ahead to the HUD grant and other resources that are out there. So for me, it was really important to leverage the existing resources and interests that were already present out there. Iowa Soybean Association in particular, with their field work and their monitoring. So can we ultimately maybe consider other ways of connecting with people? You bet. But I think you're looking at one right here in terms of what we're able to accomplish today. And we're going to keep coming up here and talking to everyone we can about these opportunities as well.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, okay, you know what your main streams are that's a problem for you.
Yeah.
Why would you not contact the farmers along that stream?
We're ultimately trying to get to the point where we will connect you in either directly or through venues like this to find out folks who are interested. And it's one reason why a really important part of this is working with Jason and other people throughout the watershed to make those individual connections. Because we know in many cases, finding landowners who are interested in pursuing this, finding farmers who are interested in doing this, is a personal network situation. That's what we're trying to facilitate today.
Yeah, but what I was going to say is if I think one of my streams have a problem, sure, I'd be interested in working with someone, but I don't hear from anybody, and yeah, I go to a couple of meetings, but I mean, it seems to me like it's all politics again,
Well, why don't you just go under the pretense that all your streams are in trouble, and you start looking at it. That's what we do.
Well, I think the best resource now is that
No, it's their biggest problem.
I feel that the important part about meetings like today and many others that we've held in this Middle Cedar area, particularly in our Middle Cedar Partnership Project, are trying to make those individual connections with folks so we can have this conversation and facilitate those opportunities for reimbursable practices in farms around the area, in that area.
Great, well, thanks, Steve and Jason, excellent presentation. And I think that actually